At dawn, when the first rays of light struggled to break through leaden clouds, a small exploration boat floated in the midst of a restless sea. The waves, tinted deep blue with golden flashes, gently lapped at the rusted hull of the ship, as if they wanted to warn it of something before it was too late. On the deck, Eric meticulously checked every piece of his diving gear. His short brown hair was damp from the salty breeze, and his trimmed beard barely concealed the lines of fatigue etched on his face. Although his hands worked with mechanical precision, it was his gaze that truly revealed who he was. An obsessed man, a treasure hunter whose reputation had been forged in the darkest depths of the ocean. He was known for finding lost relics, forgotten jewels, and ghost ships where others only saw darkness. But this time I felt something different, a shiver that did not come from the morning chill. The legend of the Lost Dutchman, a Spanish galleon that sank more than 3 centuries ago, had drawn him here. Stories told of a cursed ship, tossed by eternal storms even before its sinking, with a desperate crew facing colossal waves and winds as sharp as blades. Historical records spoke of gold, jewels, and artifacts stolen from indigenous temples, treasures that shone as brightly as human ambitions. However, local fishermen told another story, one that Eric preferred to ignore, but that resonated in his mind like a constant echo. They spoke of a guardian, an ancient creature that had protected the wreck since before the ship hit bottom. No one who had attempted to approach had ever returned. The sky was covered with gray clouds, heavy as lead. The waves struck with increasing fury, rocking the small boat as Eric silently prepared his equipment. There was no time for warnings or doubts. He knew the currents were treacherous, but that wouldn't stop him. He tightened the straps on his diving suit, checked the oxygen tank, and made sure the LED lights were working. The dark water seemed like an infinite abyss, but he had already faced worse depths. Without looking back, he leaped from the side, slicing through the surface of the ocean with a sharp blow. The descent was immediate. The currents dragged him downward as the light from the surface quickly disappeared. Around him, the water grew denser, colder. The beams from his equipment barely managed to penetrate the darkness, revealing shadows moving among the remnants of ancient shipwrecks. There was no room for fear, only the objective: to find the lost Dutchman. When he finally began to descend, modern technology contrasted sharply with the ancient surroundings. His diving suit, equipped with LED lights and high-resolution cameras, projected bright beams that barely managed to penetrate the oppressive darkness of the depths. The water was icy, dense, almost alive. Every breath through the regulator echoed like a heartbeat in his ears, imprinting on him that he was completely alone down there. When you turn on the LED lights on your equipment, finally dispelling the shadows, Eric stopped dead in his tracks. In front of him emerged a huge galleon, devoured by time yet still imposing. Its broken hull was covered with algae and coral, and the rusty cannons lay scattered like remnants of a forgotten era. The corroded beams jutted out like fractured ribs, and the tangled nets floated like trapped ghosts. The shipwreck seemed to breathe beneath the currents, alive in its death. Eric felt insignificant in the face of its grandeur, like a speck of dust before a sleeping giant. Among the wreckage, Eric found something he did not expect. Floating among corroded beams and rusty cannons, a female figure emerged from the shadows. It was not human, but neither did it completely belong to the animal kingdom. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent hue under the lights, like pearls bathed by the moon. Her hair floated around her like living seaweed, and her eyes seemed to absorb all clarity, devouring even the faint glow of the lamps. Eric was paralyzed, his body motionless as his mind struggled to process what he saw. The creature watched him with an unsettling calm, as if it knew exactly who he was and what he was seeking. There was no malice in her gaze, but neither was there compassion, only an unyielding certainty. That place did not belong to him, and she would not allow anyone to profane her domains. The ocean roared around him, as if responding to the creature's presence. Eric felt the currents tugging at him with greater force, dragging him into the depths. He knew he had to retreat, but something about that figure kept him ensnared, hypnotized. In that moment, he realized that some secrets are meant to remain buried, and that some guardians show no mercy. The creature tilted its head slightly as if evaluating Eric. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, with an almost imperceptible movement, it reached out its hand toward him. At that very moment, the remains of the galleon began to vibrate violently around him. Rusty cannons collapsed, corroded beams creaked, and the algae swayed as if alive. Suddenly, Eric saw something that chilled him even more than the creature's gaze. Among the debris, hundreds of human figures, skeletons covered in coral and algae, slowly emerged, holding in their hands the very treasures he had come to seek. But one of those objects caught his attention more than the others. A golden pendant with an engraved symbol, a sort of spiral that seemed to glow weakly even in the shadows of the wreck. Without a second thought, driven by a mixture of greed and desperation to document his find, Eric tore it from the hand of one of the skeletons. The moment his fingers touched the cold metal, he felt a shiver run through his body, as if he had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. The skeletons halted, turning their empty sockets toward him, and the creature let out a deep sound that resonated throughout the ocean. Eric turned abruptly and began swimming toward the surface with all his might. But each stroke grew heavier than the last, as if the ocean itself refused to let him go. The lights on his equipment flickered, and behind him, the creature's deep roar resonated once more. He didn't need to look back to know that the skeletons had also set in motion, crawling slowly after him. Finally, he managed to reach the surface. He climbed aboard his boat, trembling, soaking wet, with his heart pounding 1,000 times per minute. As he started the engine and began to pull away, something compelled him to look back. From the depths, the creature slowly emerged, its expressionless yet eerie face watching him from the waves. Its hair floated around it like living seaweed, and its iridescent skin shone under the moonlight. It made no gesture, but its mere presence conveyed a silent warning. This was not over. Back at home, Eric placed the pendant on his table, still faintly glowing under the light of his lamp. It was beautiful, eerie, and real. Too real. He tried cleaning it, but every time he touched the cold metal, he felt a chill that seemed to penetrate his bones. He told himself that everything had been a product of panic and the darkness beneath the water. But something inside him knew it wasn't so. When he turned on the light in his room, a faint sound caught his attention. It was an almost inaudible noise, like water splashing in a puddle. He slowly turned toward the door, and there she was. The creature was slowly walking toward him, completely soaked, leaving small puddles on the floor with every step. Her skin still shone with that iridescent hue under the artificial light, and her hair dripped water onto the carpet. She wasn't a ghost. She was as real as the pendant in his hand. Eric instinctively stepped back, but she made no aggressive move. She simply watched him with an inscrutable expression, as if she knew exactly who he was and what he had done. Then she extended her hand toward him, pointing directly at the pendant.